What does the Bible have to say about race and critical theory and the things we've been talking about?
Yeah, we in our book we go through the first half of our book is understanding. Actually, the section title is understanding. So the first 7 chapters are just about understanding these various critical social theories, critical race theory, queer theory, and different and the history of those. And then even it closes with a chapter on the positive insights of critical theories. So we in that first section we really wanted to just explain the theories charitably, comprehensively, fairly. We even got some reviewers who were angry. They said the first half of the book, they were like, this is all terrible. What is this? This is woke stuff. Shenvi's gone woke. Because it was so... I truly believe if you didn't know what we think about these theories, you could read the first half of the book and think, oh, this is promoting them. We're not. We're just explaining them. But we try to be so objective and impartial that it reads like something a critical theorist themselves could write. Then, the second section is... Actually, the hinge is, and it discurses about evangelical theology. What do Christians, Protestants, and then evangelicals, what do we believe about reality? What are some basic Christian principles about who God is, what human beings are, what's our main problem in life, what is sin? We talk about those issues in chapter 8. And then in chapters 9 through 12, we go through critical race theory, queer theory, and just talk about the immense problems. There's more than I could list. Briefly, critical theories function like a worldview. It's a way of viewing reality. It's basically acting like a religion.
Right.
You can't have 2 religions. You just can't. And we give all the examples of like all the ways in which if you can either choose to prioritize the values and the ideas and the emotional investment of critical theory or Christianity. You can't do both. And to the extent you try to, you're going to either reject Christianity or reject critical theory. So that's just one broad objection: is that these are just mutually incompatible. It's like saying I'm going to be an atheist and also a Christian. No, that you can't. They're fundamentally incompatible. I'm going to be a naturalist and also a Christian. Like, well, you can't be a naturalist Christian because Christianity teaches that the supernatural exists. You just can't be those things. So that's one broad. Number 2 is that our identities. Critical theory thinks that we need to view ourselves primarily in terms of whether I'm oppressed or oppressor. My whiteness, my masculinity, my femininity, my sexuality, all of those things define who I am primarily. I'm primarily a member of certain groups locked in a battle for dominance. Whereas Christianity says, no, primarily you're a child of God. Your relationship to God is the first thing about you that matters. And then I view everybody else around me in terms of, are they part of God's kingdom or are they not? So the vertical dimension of our identities is primary, and everything else is secondary. Well, again, that conflicts with the way that critical theory teaches us to think about our identities. In terms of how we know the truth, critical theory prioritizes lived experience. Your lived experience is what helps you determine what is true about reality. Your experience of oppression, racism, sexism, classism, those things give you authority to speak about your sexuality, or it gives you insight into justice that white men don't have. But we would say no. The ultimate authority and standard is the Bible and God's revelation in nature. We have to test our own lived experience against the Bible and against the objective evidence out there in reality. We can't just rely on our feelings to determine truth. So there are all of these. Again, we have like 4 chapters on this. But in so many ways, critical theory is just totally incompatible with Christianity. And I mean, something that's obvious, like queer theory, just denies any kind of gender binary, denies any kind of biblical sexual ethics. But it's not just queer theory, it's critical race theory, critical pedagogy. All of them, taken as a whole, are just not compatible with Christianity.
Yeah. That's interesting. I have to check myself sometimes, and I know you probably do too, just because we all are prone to follow our incentives and the most, the path of least resistance, I suppose. And for a able-bodied, tall, middle-class, middle-aged, white, straight guy like me, it is the path of least resistance is the eradication of these ideas of critical theory. Like it is to reject or at least ignore these theories. And so I have to check myself sometimes and realize it can't be that simple. I need to wrestle with these ideas and maybe even see something in them that makes me uncomfortable and learn from that, right? And in terms of the Bible, man, it's, I know you're aware, but there are plenty of passages, and not just cherry picking verses here and there, but like whole swaths of scripture that would seem to at least align with the heart of some of what I hear from the critical theory community, right? The anti-racism community. And these power dynamics, like some of that is biblical. Like I can't get around the fact that, Mary's song, for example, we're about to be, talking about Mary. We're recording this around Christmas. And so, bring down the haughty, bring down the high and mighty, lift up the lowly. Like that sounds similar in some ways, at least.
It's Marxist. She's a Marxist.
Yeah, right. I know she isn't and wasn't.
Yeah.
And yet, the heart of it is we have to pay attention to that. There's something about the heart of God that does seek to humble the arrogant and powerful and lift up the lowly and powerless. How do you reconcile that biblical truth with these sort of political ideas?
Well, one thing that's important is to recognize that the Bible does see our primary problem as our alienation from God. And so in the Bible, the humble are not just poor, right? You can be poor and wicked in the Bible, and there are examples of that. And but the reason that the poor were, well, one, they're vulnerable, and so God does care for even poor people that are not necessarily righteous, but He cares for them because they're hurting. That God cares for the lowly and the humble. But in the Bible, generally speaking, the reason that the poor are beyond the fact that they're just vulnerable, the reason that the poor are seen as somewhat praiseworthy, but it's because they realize their need. That's and on the context of the haughty, it's not that they're just rich. I mean, there were rich people in the Bible like Abraham and David and Solomon. There were rich people that followed God, that God loved. But the danger in the Bible, especially we see this in Jesus' teaching, is that if you're rich, you feel like you don't need God. Whereas if you're poor, you realize your need for God. That's the real dividing line. It's not that God just despises rich people and loves poor people. It's that people that are in poverty, and then Paul talks about this, people that they're weak, that are despised, that are the outsider, they realize their need for something more. Whereas people that are rich and competent and successful, they got their life figured out. So that's really the actual dividing line in the Bible is between, essentially, it's not rich and poor, it's actually the proud and the humble. And there's an overlap, and there's a reason there's an overlap. The reason there's an overlap is because if you are poor, you realize very fast, I can't make it on my own. If you're rich, it's very hard for you to say, oh, I need help. No, I don't need help. I'm rich. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and you can too. That pride is what keeps you from God and God's grace. Yeah. So I think that's the big difference between, say, people have called Marxism a Christian heresy because it just maps those biblical categories of, say, proud and humble onto economic categories, and then tries to solve the problem, not in terms of like, well, then trust in Jesus to rescue you, but in terms of, let's just fix the economy, and we'll uplift the oppressed and the poor, and we'll fix society. But it is, in a sense, it's just a perversion of Christianity, which has a vision of the future and of the kingdom and of liberation. So I don't want to discount the fact that we are called to care for the physically poor and the physically downtrodden. But I do think Christians have to see our fundamental problem as a spiritual one.